This is awesome.
It has worked like this for a long time, proceeding systematically and efficiently in order to reach its desired aims, which involve taking over our intellectual center before moving on to our emotional center. It gains credibility through the persuasion and fear that characterize all of its products, and more interesting still is that we are led to believe it is for our own good. Nonetheless, not everything has been a benefit for our psyche or been a source of entertainment. Indeed, millions are affronted by it, and this has caused the fairy tale illusion to fade. Families, young people and adults are losing interest in countless films that are filled with hidden codified messages and packed with esoteric symbols and occult mysteries, which have become a common trend. In fact, the film Mecca is home to a hidden but notorious secret society that represents the cornerstone of economic power and all forms of media. Is it possible that the elite managing the film industry form part of a secret conspiracy involving Hollywood producers and directors, whose aim is to use celebrities and entertainment as a powerful propaganda-based tool designed to mold our culture, attitudes and social behavior? There is no doubt that Hollywood embodies the corrupt elite's ministry of propaganda and represents a majority share of the film industry's global business. It has been huge since its inception and has developed like any show designed to appeal to a vast segment of the populace. And as such, it generates considerable profits. It is also widely known that the Hollywood industry has become the film-making arm of the advertising sector. And the Satanist elite has always tried to use it to pressure us into adopting their twisted view of the world. Based on box office sales, they employ the economic means at their disposal to finance all kinds of films. These films are a smokescreen to conceal a century of greed, corruption, cover-ups, and overdoses, and to hide the sex scandals and sexual abuse that go on behind the cameras. Thus, this dream world gave rise to countless actors who achieved more success, status and acclaim than they ever imagined possible. And whilst the industry was busy making impressive films featuring heavily made-up actors who would charm the world, its sole interest was to increase the wealth of those behind the scenes of an industry that had become a hotbed of false values, as it welcomed an ever-increasing number of con artists and low-level charlatans. The origins of cinema in the US are not rooted in Hollywood, however. In fact, the East Coast, near New York, was the first ever film-making center, but that area's rainy climate and long winters caused the loss of many hours of outdoor shooting, which was ultimately why filmmakers moved to the other side of the country, to Hollywood. Features that would shape the personality of Hollywood cinema. Comedies, film noir, adventure, horror, action, science fiction, romance, dramas, fantasy, erotic and pornographic cinema. A considerable number of films fall into these clearly defined categories which are recognized by the public at large. The 1930s and 40s were known as the Golden Age of Hollywood, and a number of film studios were established at that time. and big production companies began to effectively control the global market, laying the groundwork of what would later become the hegemony of US cinema. This was how leading production companies put together the cinema crews that would become the crux of Hollywood studio power. They produced a sizable number of films that were distributed via the extensive distribution network they owned, not just in the United States, but throughout the world. Meanwhile, huge chains of movie theaters were established and cinema ownership became the driving force behind the industry. In other words, the more theaters they owned, the more films they needed to make. Without a doubt, the Hollywood studio system monopolized American cinema for 2 decades, during which Hollywood became one of the most modern centers in the United States, particularly when big screen celebrities started to establish their homes there, or were given a star on the Walk of Fame. Yet, as the years passed, Hollywood became the center of the American and international mafia. It was where mafiosos, drug traffickers and assassins would intermingle with politicians. Besides destroying, bribing and blackmailing many families, they would earn quick money through intimidation, threats and violence. This was how by the 1930s, their assets would surpass the multi-million-dollar mark, thanks to their pledge to avoid exposing certain facts that would have put more than one star in a difficult situation. Later, in the 1950s, Hollywood's reputation gained further renown, thanks to books and films that laundered its image. Nonetheless, dark and diabolical acts and extreme violence were prevalent and involved corrupt individuals without morals who were extremely feared in the Mecca of cinema. They would maintain their ties with influential mafiosos who had absolute power over the star factory. One of the reasons there have been so many film noir movies since the 1930s is that gangsterism influenced everything, compelling Hollywood to intimidate employees and force actors to hand over a significant portion of their wages when they went to work for other studios. They would even go so far as to destroy the career of those who did not share their point of view or disagreed with their directives. Using threats and bribes, these gangsters, magnates and stars would join forces, and in many cases, they had come from the same beginnings. And what can be said about the history of Hollywood, which is fraught with romantic scandals, addictions, overdoses, mysterious deaths and even murders? It is clear that Hollywood generates stars and sometimes controls them, protecting celebrities from themselves and from the public. In other cases, however, when celebrities do not bow to industry demands, they are abandoned or even eliminated. Thus, as the years passed, Hollywood cinema continued mingling with the mafia and other corrupt individuals, but it also shifted into an underground world of extreme and depraved Luciferism. Within this context, renowned actors were forced into sodomy and even assassinated ritualistically by the powerful Satanists of Hollywood. eventually become great actors on the silver screen.
Yeah,